not our presentation.
Hi everybody, it's Raul. Welcome to another episode of the Closing Tag. The name of this episode, episode 11, is I Was Right About Kyrie and Your PR Firm Sucks. Yeah, that's the name of the episode. We're talking about the PR disaster that is the Portland Trail Blazers right now. We're talking about Damian Lillard, talking about the Jazz, talking about John Stockton and his really weird fascination with not taking vaccines. And we've also got some major SEO news coming out of Google. So yeah, it's a somewhat well-rounded but short episode, considering we're going to be doing an interview episode next week, the week after this drops. That will be with Ben Phipps, just to give you guys a heads up. So stay tuned for that. A reminder that this podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on TuneIn, on Pandora, all the stuff, and as well as on YouTube and Facebook. And that is because of our amazing sponsors over at Galactic Blue, your professional web development, graphic design, and logo design resource. Visit galacticblue.net for more information on how your business can benefit from our services, as well as the Telltale Heart. I just got done talking to McLean Lundquist, congratulating him on yet another International Film Festival selection, this time in Mexico City. So yeah, congrats to him. And I told him by the time we get him on the podcast, he's going to spend the entire episode listing all the film festivals he's going to be a part of. So instead of having him list all of it, you can just go on telltalemovie.com and see the list for yourself. So there you go. And with that, we are going to be diving right into episode 11, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself here, of the Closing Tag. And the name of that episode is I Was Right About Kyrie and Your PR Firm Sucks. Please do enjoy. Welcome SEO gurus and Google stans. Welcome Jazz fans and Blazers fans alike. Welcome to another edition of the Closing Tag. Hi, I'm Raul Smith. I'm the President, CEO, Co-founder, and Lead Developer for Galactic Blue. I want to thank everybody for watching and listening to the podcast. We are on most of the major platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and more. And just in case you didn't know, each and every video episode of the podcast is available on our dedicated Facebook page, as well as on YouTube. I'm going to say, links are all in the description. When you get there, go say hi, leave a like, sub to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications if you could, please. As always, we have two amazing sponsors for the pod. The first, of course, being Galactic Blue, your professional web development, graphic design, and logo design resource. Visit galacticblue.net for more information on how your business can benefit from our services. Second being the Telltale Heart, based on the famous Edgar Allan Poe short story and from the creative and brilliant mind of McLean Lundquist, comes the most frightening deep dive into the sea of madness, already racking up multiple awards and appearances in many indie and short film circuits, as well as international circuits. Visit telltalemovie.com for more information on where you can find this film. So, heads up, this episode is going to be a little heavy on the sports side. A lot to get to, especially since we're having Ben Phipps on the show in the next episode. So, as usual, we'd like to start this episode off with some tech news. So in our last episode, I discussed upcoming changes to the Google core algorithm and mentioned that when I learned more about the changes that I would report back here on the pod. Well, now we have more information. In the last 6 weeks, Google has made 2 major updates to the core algorithm, a page experience update, a Google Predator update, and 2 spam updates. Let's start with the Google core update. Without getting too into the technical weeds too deeply, Google is improving their ranking algorithm, page content ratio, and keyword search algorithm that helps to improve search ranking for those that, as a Google spokesperson calls it, play by the rules. Most sites will not see a dramatic change, though there have been reports of multiple sites losing page rank based on outdated and inaccurate page content. One of the biggest topics is Google's role in attempting to minimize or remove search results for slanderous or predatory sites that have info on you but will only remove it if you pay them money. This, according to a Google PR representative, is considered the new age IRS scheme, since people are growing wise to the increasing number of phone and email scams regarding back taxes, money owed to Social Security, or past due amounts. Criminals are adapting to the changing times. Thankfully, Google is also adapting to those same changing times, looking to cut the predatory site schemes off before they gain too much traction. As with the phone scams, do not give out your personal information to anybody you do not know, especially your Social Security number or bank account information. It is always best to alert the authorities before giving into those demands. In another update, Google has changed how it responds to different types of link attributes. How it responds to a no-follow link versus, say, a sponsored link. Google spokesperson John Mueller intimated that over time, Google will have a different set of rules in their algorithm for each type of link attribute, but it may not fully be realized for at least a few more months. As I always say when it comes to these matters of search optimization, mobile friendliness and on-page content are going to be your biggest allies and also your biggest pitfalls, all depending on how you utilize them. Google places a very high emphasis on these things, and it would be very wise to placate that emphasis by having a mobile-friendly site with good, original, rich, on-page content. Having this will go a long way to getting your page rank up in all search engines, especially as Google goes, so goes the rest of the industry. Descend into madness with this retelling of the classic Edgar Allan Poe short story. The award-winning Telltale Heart film takes a head-first deep dive into the Sea of Madness, retelling a classic psychological thriller with a mind-bending, pulse-pounding, bloody, disgusting film, starring award-winning actor Sonny Grimsley and directed by the brilliant McLean Lundquist. The Telltale Heart has won awards and made appearances in many short and indie film festivals, ranging from the FilmQuest Film Festival in Provo, Utah, to the Minefield Film Festival in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and even international film festivals throughout the world. Revisit Edgar Allan Poe's short story, as this film brings more than just a classic horror story to a new audience, but also discovers a creative way to explore the groundbreaking psychological thriller. The narrative is enhanced through an unprecedented use of sounds and light, and the characters blend a modern sensibility with anachronistic charm, as seen through an unsettling array of time and space, while a shifting setting disorients the unwitting audience. What is seen and what is heard leads the perplexed audience to ask, what is insanity and what truly constitutes reality? TelltaleMovie.com for more information on this brilliantly insane thriller. The Closing Tag is honored to have them as a sponsor of the podcast. So remember how I said not that long ago that I felt this year was going to be the Utah Jazz's year? Yeah, that didn't turn out as well as I'd hoped. Though I was right, after all, about Kyrie Irving, so there's that. The Jazz were eliminated by the Los Angeles Clippers 4-2 in the second round, and the front office is paying a heavy price for it already. After a long-standing series of arguments and buttings of heads between head coach Quinn Snyder and president of basketball operations Dennis Lindsey, owner Ryan Smith has decided that Dennis Lindsey's efforts would be better served as an advisor to ownership, including Smith, Dwayne Wade, and the other owners. Apparently, I didn't even know this when I did that whole fluff piece on the Jazz a few episodes back, but apparently the Miller family's still around. They own like 5% of the team, so yeah, there's that. Now, Lindsey can spin it all he wants about how this was a decision that he came to a while ago after talking with both the Millers and Ryan Smith, but according to inside sources, this decision stems all the way back to the draft selection last year of Udoka Azubuike. Wow, say that 5 times fast. Now, drafting a backup center on paper doesn't sound that bad. After all, that was the Jazz's biggest weakness coming out of the pandemic-riddled 2020 season. However, drafting a backup center and signing another one to a big mid-level exception contract is a little overkill. Not to mention, Doak was injury-riddled even during his time in Kansas. So the warning signs were right there that Doak would wind up being another Tony Bradley. Kids, Google Tony Bradley. There were other questionable decisions made during the last couple seasons. Bringing back pet projects like George Niang and Mia Oni proved to be costly during the playoffs. Not focusing enough time to bring in a reliable backup point guard instead ended up coming back to haunt the Jazz during the Clippers series when Mike Conley went down with a hamstring injury. And the signing of G League prospect Rajon Tucker a couple seasons back proved to be quite the bust as well. But we should also focus on the positives of Dennis Lindsey's tenure with the Jazz as well. He was single-handedly responsible for bringing Donovan Mitchell to the team. He helped orchestrate the trade that landed Mike Conley. His recruiting tactics helped secure Bojan Bogdanovic, and it was Lindsey that advised Jazz general manager Justin Zanuck to give Cleveland a call to inquire about trading troubled point guard Dante Exum for journeyman guard Jordan Clarkson. Jordan Clarkson that wound up being the 6th man of the year. That turned out to be one of the most lopsided trades in Jazz history, since Clarkson ended up winning 6th man of the year, and Exum is barely even in the league anymore. With the day-to-day operations now falling into the hands of Zanuck, the Jazz will be tested now more than ever. There are some glaring holes in the team, particularly in the areas of bench depth and wing defense. A decision will need to be made soon about how to handle life after Joe Ingles. Ingles is entering the final year of his contract, and he's already intimated that he's likely going to retire soon. And perhaps the biggest decision of all will be what to do about Mike Conley. Conley is an unrestricted free agent, free to sign wherever he wants. It's possible he could re-sign with Utah. After all, he likes it here. His wife is in love with Park City, and he and Mitchell formed a bond. But he's also 33. He's coming off 2 very disturbing years where hamstring injuries have plagued him. However, you have to ask yourself, if not Mike Conley, then who? The Jazz are already over the salary cap, even with just the players they have under contract coming into next season, all 7 of them. And there are very few trade options left. Then there's the big elephant in the room. Who do the Jazz pair with Zanuck in the front office? BYU fans seem intent on bringing in Danny Ainge. Oh, sorry for that. I almost threw up in my mouth. The former vice president of basketball operations for the Boston Celtics and former BYU player. However, the ownership group led by Smith have expressed interest in bringing diversity and social justice culture into the front office, and an old, out-of-touch white guy who recently called a group of Black Lives Matter protesters thugs doesn't exactly fit the bill. So there's talk that Wade may actually be in talks to bring former Miami Heat executive Shane Battier, who is a younger, darker man, into the Jazz front office. Now, Battier, I would not mind at all. The man's got a mind for the game, has an eye for talent, and as a player was one of those types that if he was on your opposing team, he was a jerk. But if he was on your team, he's your jerk. One of those types. Plus, he was the one that helped bring Jimmy Butler from Philadelphia to Miami, a move many say helped build that 2020 Heat team that went to the finals. As for Lindsay, as I mentioned on Twitter, when he took over the team, I was still a fan, but my fandom had waned tremendously after the debacle that was the Tyrone Corbin, Kevin O'Connor era. But Lindsay helped build an embarrassment into the contender, and that level of excellence should not go unnoticed. So many thanks and well wishes to go to Dennis Lindsay. Thank you for the memories, and I wish you well in your travels going forward. Since we're on the topic of the Utah Jazz, I feel like I need to get something off my chest. Something's been bothering me for some time. And that is the absolute blatant disrespect the big sports media, particularly ESPN and Fox Sports, have been displaying towards small market teams. And keep in mind, this is just the NBA. I have not noticed any similar trends with the NFL or Major League Baseball. This is almost exclusively an NBA problem, and newsflash, it's been happening for some time. It's only now gotten to be more and more transparent. I'm about to put some people by name on blast, and spoiler alert, I may be attacking your favorite opinion columnist or person in this rant, so heads up. Let's start with Skip Bayless, a man who has gone on record numerous times as saying his favorite all-time NBA moment was when Michael Jordan hit the shot to end the 1998 NBA Finals against the Jazz, not because Jordan was his favorite player or because of the historical implications of the shot. No. He liked that moment so much because it was the shot that sealed the Jazz's fate. He has admitted as much. Shannon Sharpe, a notorious Lakers homer who will stop at nothing to completely bury a small market team and suggest that their best player be traded to the Lakers without so much as giving up anything of value in return. See the latest examples in Damian Lillard and DeMar DeRozan. Kendrick Perkins, who's about as bright as a 4-watt light bulb, going on TV talking about how nobody wants to play in Utah, a rhetoric we've heard so many times from players over the years. Need I remind people about Ronnie Cycli or Derek Harper? Max Kellerman, who went on First Take on ESPN talking about how an NBA Finals between the Utah Jazz and the Milwaukee Bucks would bring in an all-time low in the ratings, despite the fact that it would feature two of the biggest rising stars in the entire league in Utah's Donovan Mitchell and Milwaukee's Giannis Antetokounmpo. If anything, a break from the repetitive Lakers or Warriors or Heat or whatever team LeBron is on would be a welcome change. And having two teams that aren't necessarily considered a super team would probably have a very good, feel-good type of vibe to it. Even now, as of this recording, Game 1 of the NBA Finals, which ironically enough is the Milwaukee Bucks versus another small market team, the Phoenix Suns. I mean, these two franchises have never really won an NBA champion. Well, okay, Phoenix has never won an NBA championship. Milwaukee's last championship was back in 1971. So yeah, I mean, just about anybody listening to this podcast would salivate at that type of feel-good story. Sadly, because of all the injuries throughout the league, Max's words may ring prophetically true that this is going to be one of the lowest rated NBA finals in history, which is really sad. Of course, they'll never admit that it was because of all the stars being hurt, the Kawhi Leonards and the Giannis's and the Trae Youngs and the Mike Conleys and the Donovan Mitchells and the LeBron James and the Anthony Davises and so on, so forth. No. They'll just spin it to the point at this and say that it's the most boring final ever because it's not the Lakers. And then there's Brian Windhorst, the worst of them all. Let's go back a few years, shall we? During the 2018-2019 season, a rumored deal at the trade deadline was all but in place between the Jazz and the Memphis Grizzlies, in which the Jazz would send a package headlined by then point guard Ricky Rubio to the Grizzlies for Mike Conley. The deal fell through because the Grizzlies were not interested in Rubio, but the Jazz kept insisting they take on Rubio and his expiring contract. Windhorst reported that the deal didn't go through because Conley, and I quote, showed absolutely no interest in going to Utah, but rather to an Eastern Conference team like the Raptors, end quote. The deal would later be revised, partly because of Rubio's free agency, that expiring contract, expired, and it would go through with the Jazz receiving Conley and the Grizzlies receiving a pretty neat package of Grayson Allen, Jay Crowder, and a flurry of draft options. Conley would go on record as saying that he fell in love with the town almost instantly, as well as the people, and his wife was even spotted house hunting in nearby Park City, which is a very rare sight by NBA spouses. Jazz 1, Windhorst 0. Then, when the COVID lockdown happened and the entire NBA and the media and the fans were crucifying Rudy Gobert for his actions, going as far as to say it was his fault that everything just shut down, Windhorst reported that the relationship between Gobert and his teammates had strained, and even went as far as to say that the relationship between Gobert and Donovan Mitchell was so badly damaged that he termed it, and I quote, unsalvageable. That was the exact word, unsalvageable. And yeah, the relationship between Gobert and the team was on shaky ground for a while, to be sure, but not to the extent that Windhorst was making it out to be. In fact, the Gobert-Mitchell relationship had improved as a result of the COVID situation, and they seemed to be pretty, I wouldn't say good friends, but needless to say, they're going to be on the same team for some time, both having re-signed with the team and, raking in all that money. Jazz 2, Windhorst 0. Then came the news recently, on the heels of Dennis Lindsey's announcement that he's transitioning out of the front office, Windhorst decided now would be a good time to let everybody know that he thinks Dwayne Wade is concerned about keeping Donovan Mitchell in Utah long term. Quote, I think Dwayne Wade is seriously concerned about Donovan Mitchell's desire to stay in Utah long term. End quote. And with that one line, the trolls, the Heat fans, the Laker fans, and the paranoid Jazz fans all practically melted Twitter down. Of course he's concerned. Newsflash, every owner is concerned about the long-term investment they put into players. The Clippers are just as concerned about Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Portland is increasingly concerned about Damian Lillard. Well, at least they should be. Milwaukee was concerned for a while there about Giannis before signing him to the largest contract extension in league history. Orlando's concerned anytime a big-name player comes through their door. It's called human nature. And listen, I don't want to come on here and just completely bash the Skip Baylesses and the Brian Windhorsts of the world. I get it. They're playing the game, just like anybody else in their position would. They're playing the smart internet clickbait game. They're more concerned with clicks and with likes and with views that all these low rent websites that run their heart garbage takes just absolutely salivate over, instead of reporting the facts 100% unadulterated. And I'm sorry to say this, but news stations are just as bad, if not worse. And sadly, ESPN is part of the problem. A very large part. They've gotten increasingly transparent with their small market hate over the years. It used to be that when the Spurs would win an NBA title, it would get maybe a 10-minute blip on a 90-minute Sports Center, and then they would spend the rest of their NBA time talking about LeBron James house hunting in Miami. I exaggerate, but not by much. Now they're actively rooting for big names to leave small markets. Max Kellerman would go on a campaign to have Giannis sign with the Lakers instead of the Bucks. Stephen A. Smith has been recruiting on behalf of his beloved Knicks to get guys like Kevin Durant and James Harden. Anytime there's a story about racism in Boston or Philadelphia, it gets a mention, maybe two. But, whenever there's even the slightest story of racism in Utah, oh man, bring out the entire NBA crew working for ESPN to talk about how racist that weird little cult state is. And don't get it twisted. I am not by any means defending the people that live here. I live here. I know how bad it is. We haven't elected a progressive official for U.S. Senate, representative, or governor really ever. The state motto is vote red till you're dead. We have the largest per capita LGBT population in the entire United States, but the most backwards LGBT legislation in the union. Our community is more concerned about making sure people can't watch porn than they are resolving the increasing opioid overdose problem. There are many, many times that I wish I were anywhere else but here. But then I see Donovan Mitchell, a guy from the uber-liberal Northeast, trying to make life better for underrepresented people here in one of the most conservative states, not because of publicity or clicks or likes or follows on Twitter, but because he gives a damn. Contrary to what the Brian Windhorsts, the Miami trolls, and the pessimists on Twitter would say. I see him having an open dialogue with Burgess Owens, a notorious Trump supporter and the head of the Utah Republican Party, about the problems young people of color face in society today. I see a guy like Ryan Smith, a Mormon who views social issues as important to discuss and resolve, using his wealth and position of influence for good, paying for the college tuitions of 60 underrepresented children in this state. I mean, two men, trying to make the world a better place, even if it's just a small little corner of the world, even if everything they say or do in this state is met with skepticism and hate. And I think, man, if they can care enough to try and make a difference here, maybe I can too. And I think that's a lesson that the Brian Windhorsts of the world could definitely learn from. Really a lesson we can all learn from. So, while I'm heated up and fired up and ready to go through a brick wall, let's talk about something else that's got me frustrated recently. So, recently in a video that was released online, Utah Jazz legend and point guard GOAT John Stockton openly admitted to being anti-vax. He used the same cliched lines we've heard from all the anti-vaxxers. I've heard stuff online, I did my independent research, it's not as bad as it's made out to be, so on and so on. Now, as a Jazz fan, this one stung. Because I love John Stockton. I hold him in the highest regard. He is in my top 5 greatest players of all time. I don't care who you put up on a table, Stockton's in the top 5 for me. But as you know, I am also very pro-vax. It's been a proven fact that vaccines have helped to prolong the life of man, woman, and child in this society. And I am forever grateful that my family and I will never have to know the horrors of diseases like mumps or polio because of vaccines. But his opinion of vaccinations does not sway how I feel about him as a player, nor is that the source of my frustration. My frustration came when I went online. That's my first mistake. I went online. And fans online do what fans online do in these situations. Look to cancel or censor the person behind the controversy. In this case, an online petition circulated asking the Utah Jazz to take down the statues outside Vivint Arena of both John Stockton and Karl Malone, citing Stockton's anti-vax theology and Karl Malone's checkered past regarding statutory rape back when he was at Louisiana Tech. I mean, are you kidding me right now? Listen, as you've probably gathered from listening to my voice these last 10 episodes, you know I am all about holding people accountable for their actions and making examples of famous people that made horrific mistakes and even tearing down a few statues. I mean, come on. General Lee, really? Anyway. But last time I checked, John Stockton didn't go around sexually assaulting women or kids during his tenure in Utah. Karl Malone, as far as I know, didn't commit treason against the United States by joining and leading an enemy army into battle on our soil. There's a gigantic difference between disagreeing with something John Stockton said and throwing Harvey Weinstein in prison for countless sexual assault charges. It's not even fair to say that it's an apples to oranges comparison. It's more like comparing apples to rocks. This is the rare time that I will say wholeheartedly, stop canceling people. Stop throwing hashtag Stockton is over party on Twitter. Stop signing stupid online petitions looking to tear down a statue. By the way, online petitions are the biggest waste of time ever. At me on that one. Just stop. Just stop, okay? You're embarrassing yourselves and the rest of us in the process. Just stop. The one team that has a lot more than just angry fans on Twitter to worry about right now is the Portland Trail Blazers. Let's take you on a trip and see what's been happening the last few weeks, shall we? So since their unceremonious dismissal from the NBA playoffs at the hands of the Denver Nuggets, Portland has decided to mutually agree to part ways with their head coach, Terry Stotts. By the way, can we all just agree that mutually agree to part ways is corporate speak for, yeah, he got fired? Essentially, especially when it's the organization's PR guy making the announcement and not the guy that's cleaning out his desk. Can we just agree on that? Cool. The coaching search has been going rather nicely, actually. They brought in a number of candidates, did their due diligence, and the search came down reportedly to 2 people. San Antonio assistant Becky Hammon, who has already proven that she can be a great asset to any team's coaching staff, and former Finals MVP and Clippers assistant Chauncey Billups. In the end, Billups was selected over the battle-tested Hammon. Reportedly, this did not sit well with the star point guard and the greatest Trailblazers player since the days of Clyde Drexler and Jerome Kersey, that of course being Damian Lillard. What came next is the stuff nightmare fuel is made from. During a press conference officially announcing Billups as the new coach, a question was lobbed at Billups regarding an incident back in 1997 involving a young woman. Now, being the man of independent research that I am, I dug up the incident in question. During his time in Boston in 1997, sexual assault charges were levied against Billups by a young woman accusing him of forcing himself onto her. The charges were eventually dropped and Billups settled the matter out of court. Now, on the surface, that doesn't look bad. At least not Kobe Bryant in Eagle, Colorado bad. But it still looks bad. It still looks really bad. However, his answer to the question seemed rather contrite and in a lot of ways remorseful. I mean, yeah, it's easily possible that he could have just rehearsed that reaction because, I mean, let's face it, in this day and age of every living being of influence, being held accountable for everything they've ever done, Billups had to know that situation was going to come up. Someone was going to ask the question. He had to have known that. So he probably rehearsed himself up, practiced in front of the mirror a few times, saying, oh, I'm so sorry that this happened. It's never going to happen again. I dealt with the matter and da-da-da-da. Whatever answer that he gave to the press regarding that. The follow-up interaction was, by any and all definitions, a PR nightmare. When another reporter decided to ask a follow-up question to the matter, the PR staff stepped in with, quote, "We've addressed this. It's been asked and answered, so happy to move on to the next question," end quote. I mean, whoa. I'm no PR expert. I don't play one on the radio or on internet, but that's a bad look. That is a catastrophically bad look. Even if you hired Donald Trump to be your next PR guy, I'm not sure you could look any worse. This has certainly gotten the attention of Lillard, who has reportedly become very disgruntled with the team between this and the continued playoff disappointments over the years. I mean, keep in mind, Portland has only been to the conference finals twice this century. In 2019, Lillard and company were emphatically swept by the Golden State Warriors. And before that, you'd have to go all the way back to that classic 7-game matchup against Shaq and Kobe's Lakers back in 2000. Damian Lillard has never won a conference finals game. Now, in a tweet that resurfaced from back in 2016, this is around the same time that he was rumored to be in negotiations for a new Supermax deal, Lillard was asked by some fans what his preference would be of where he'd like to play. His response, and I quote, "If Portland doesn't want me, Lakers or Jazz." End quote. Lakers is understandable because it's the Lakers, but for those that don't understand the Jazz aspect of it, let me just kind of break it down. Lillard went to school at Weber State University, which is located in Ogden, Utah. Go Wildcats. He went to school for 4 years in Utah. He knows the area. He knows the people here. He's greeted every time he comes to play against the Jazz to a hero's welcome. I mean, he's practically Jimmer Fredette if Jimmer Fredette had actual basketball skills. So it's understandable he'd want to come back. It's understandable that he'd want to return to Utah. Here's the problem with both of those scenarios. Short of giving up draft picks they don't currently own or star players they have no intention of giving up, least of all LeBron with the Lakers, neither LA nor Utah is getting Damian Lillard anytime soon. Just recently signed a new 4-year extension worth over $176 million that runs to 2025. He will be earning nearly $40 million next season. So just to match the salary of the guy, the Jazz would have to give Portland a ton of assets. Assets Portland may or may not even want. And the Lakers, I mean, forget about it. The only realistic possibility of even coming close to matching that salary would be to give Portland either LeBron James or Anthony Davis. 2 players the Lakers have already stated are untouchable, and for good reason. Make no mistake though, the threat of trading Damian Lillard is real. Just because his preferred destinations are incapable of getting him this time around, that doesn't mean other teams are out of the running as well. Miami could always be a player. Denver is said to be interested in him. There's even talks of the Nets possibly giving Portland Kyrie Irving. Yes, I was right all along about Kyrie Irving. I am going to keep repeating that now. I mean, Portland is a hot mess. With ownership in a massive state of flux since the death of Paul Allen, it's really easy to see why. The best run teams in sports usually have good, solid, competent ownership that lets the business people handle business and the sports people handle sports. Up until Allen's death, Portland was one of those teams. Now they have a general manager that has no idea what he's doing, a coaching staff that feels makeshifted together, and a disgruntled point guard. Oh, and arguably the worst PR team in the league. Seriously, if that PR person worked for my company, he would be fired on the spot after that statement. Just saying. Hi guys, Raul Smith here with a very important announcement. After a schedule change and 2 weeks off recovering from a personal injury, we're coming back on Twitch for more site building. Starting July 12th, Galactic Blue will stream the continuing site building of the Closing Tag website every Monday and Tuesday with the exception of July 26th and 27th until the site has been completed. Follow us on all the social media platforms for more information. Links for all of these can be found in the description of this podcast. Also, very important news, theclosingtag.com is the official URL to go to once the site has been completed. We will keep you updated on further developments regarding the site build as they arise. Again, twitch.tv/galacticblue1, that's Galactic Blue with the number 1, is where you want to go every Monday and Tuesday starting July 12th for continuing coverage of the closingtag.com site build. Hope to see you there. And with that, we are out of time for today. I want to thank each and every person that is watching the archive videos on YouTube, downloading the pod, or even checking us out at our Facebook page. Links are all in the description. Every view, every download, every listen counts, so thank you, as always. The next episode will be the interview episode scheduled to drop on July 16th. That's the episode with Ben Phipps. You'll definitely want to check that one out. A reminder that this podcast is sponsored by Galactic Blue, your professional web development, graphic design, and logo design resource. Visit galacticblue.net for more information on how your business can benefit from our services, as well as The Telltale Heart, the indie short horror film that's just nailing every single film festival out there. Visit telltalemovie.com for more info on where you may be able to find it in your area. If you would like to help sponsor the podcast, we don't have a Patreon yet, but I am open to suggestions. Hit me up at raul@galacticblue.net. We are on Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and many other podcast providers. Our video of each podcast can be found on our dedicated YouTube channel as well as our Facebook page. You already know what I'm going to say. Links are all in the description. Thank you again, guys, so much for watching and for listening. And remember to always include your closing tags.